Oh boy, do we have an episode today. This was a fantastic conversation with the host of a YouTube channel called The Whales of Wall Street. His name is Simon Buckingham, and he knows so much about the Digital Pound Foundation, the digital dollar, Fed Now, wallets that are going to be used for the digital pound, quant, all this stuff. We talk about so many different topics in this video. I urge you to watch all the way to the end. Remember to like this video. Actually, click the button. I'm going to wait. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Also, subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get into it. Hey, Simon.
Mate, how are you? Sorry about that. It's absolute chaos with dogs and everything. I had to move them out of the room.
It's all right. Don't worry about it.
Good. You
How you
doing all
doing?
right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like there's so much happening, and something's happening soon, like something good.
Yeah.
I just got a feeling about it. There's a massive influx and this kind of stream of documents from all over the place that are just so bullish.
Yeah.
And that's kind of given me this overall feeling that there's got to be some reason, and that's part of what I wanted to talk with you about today, because I've been diving into that financial services and markets bill.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Good
Yeah,
timing. It's just so
so
coincidental.
cool, and it's so cool that it's happening in London too.
Yeah.
Like England. It's just I love that. I don't know. It just seems like you've got the court case coming to an end, and at the same time, I mean, I've got a video coming out today, the day before this video comes out,
Mhm.
about the digital dollar.
Yeah.
And these seem to be, I know the digital dollar's been a conversation for a while, but it's not really had anything formalized. Just I feel like because that regulation and
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That whole SEC circus is part of it for sure. I don't know if you delved into the old, it used to be called the Economic Relief Fund back in, I think around November 2019. They changed it to the COVID Relief Fund. Obviously, this is about 4 or 5 months before everything kicked off. Read into what you will. But the point being in that is you can still download the document off the US government sites. The representation of the word digital dollar is significant in that document, and relatively was a trial of using a digital dollar to utilize that as for the they had like the stimulus checks, like we had furlough over here. It was the understanding that within this that they were using that principle to try and trial that system, see how many people would use it, how many people rely on it, how easy it is to mint these things, how does it affect the economy, and the utilization. There was a really weird reference in there about around the Federal Reserve, that they had the rights to everyone's kind of like digital wallet within it as well. So you could start seeing the stepping stones of like how we're going to perceive CBDCs and the infrastructure of things moving forward. But your exact point there is it's been on the cards for a long time. It's not news, CBDCs long time. Even back in the 80s, they were talking about this sort of stuff. So it's not new, but to see it in our lifetime when we're, you think about it and the concepts, the theories, some people call them conspiracies, whatever, in our time frame is mental. By 2025, this will all be worldwide. And then, physical money will still be around a bit, but actually, let's be honest, it's going to be phased out, whether that's 5, 10, 15 years in time. As they say, you create the solution, then create the problem, put your solution in, and then you become the hero. And your exact point, timings of the interest rates, the hikes, the inflation, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden, guys, we got a blockchain here, and we can fix this with this, and everyone will be so relieved and happy to hear about it. They'll just go, yeah, please give it to me. Basic universal income, wonderful, bring it to me, and they'll pat the governments and stuff on the head with it, So it's really conclusive time,
Yeah, and I think what's been most interesting to me is that the debate, the majority of the conversations that are happening about CBDCs all seem to be digital pound, digital euro, the digital yuan, or whatever it is. Like it seems to be everywhere except the US.
Mhm.
But now there's a document come out basically providing it's delayed because in Europe these conversations had already happened,
Yeah.
gone through those documents ages ago. But now it's starting to happen as like this delayed effect in the US where they're now saying, okay, how do we actually make a digital dollar even better than it could be?
Yeah.
And then all the language within there kind of pointing towards the assets that we
Yeah, that's it.
know
Yeah.
are kind of integral.
It's kind of like two hidden stories potentially, because the Americans may have been working on it and just trying to like facilitate the fact that they want to keep that reserve currency element in the world, but in a digital format, and try and maybe enhance it that way, or they are playing catch up. And maybe the SEC thing. I've always believed that's a bit of a diversion and a bit of a theatre production anyway. But I've always perceived, just from what I've been doing research wise and dot connecting, that would make sense. It's a plausible theory for sure. But you nailed it on the head just a minute ago. The digital yuan has been around for many years. It was trialed in their Olympics. What was that, a year or two ago now? A massive amount of people utilizing that. The social scoring system. All these things will come into play across the world at some point in their own format. Digital identities. I've seen an article the other day that the whole of Europe's now introducing the biometric systems, in passport control. And this is where a lot of the projects, I'm sure you invest in many of them as well, where it started to conclude that, oh, okay, it's not conversations anymore. This thing's actually happening. And from a parliamentary level, of course, like European Commission, everything, they've been working on this for years with I forget the name of it, but the European Commission actually has its own like blockchain organization within there operating all these infrastructures. But again, it's literally to that point of, it's on our doorstep. This is the crazy exciting thing. And some people are now asking, like, I need to make sure I'm invested in the right projects, the right technologies that are going to be enforcing or implementing this kind of thing. So the cat's just destroyed the camera. So yeah, it's really, really exciting time. But equally, loads of questions. I mentioned before about being at these Digital Pound Foundation events and stuff. There's a lot of public questions, maybe concern. I saw there's been a few like BBC publications about what's been coming up with that. And I knew this happened. We talked about it briefly the other day, Lewis, is like, in many of the things like the agricultural bill and stuff, it's always like, oh, we'll put this out there as a consensus for people to say things about it or raise the concerns, but they won't tell anyone about it. But then on the day that it's going to be finished, they'll go, oh, yes, this has been around for ages. You have plenty of time to do that. And then before you know it, it's signed off and everyone's like, oh, I didn't want that. Oh, I had questions on that. Too late. That's how fast it is happened, Incredible.
I heard a quote yesterday. Actually, I can't remember it. It might have actually been Tristan Tate of all people. But he said something very profound about how the government kind of integrates themselves and takes away freedoms from you without you knowing. And the way it kind of goes, it essentially is, we'll come after the homeless people and we'll take away their freedoms. You don't care because you're not homeless. Then they creep in a little bit further with other groups that you don't relate with, and then you are that final group, but there's no one else to fight your corner because they've all been taken. And I feel like that's the case. It's a wild, and that what you said about the whole it's like a grand test of testing people's tolerance. It's multi-layered, that thing.
For sure.
We need to test the infrastructure for payments. We also need to test to see how willing people are to kind of listen to us. There's multi-layer test. And as time goes on, I think this is what kind of flipped loads of people from thinking, okay, we need to do what the government says, to hang on a second, vaccines might actually be really bad for us. Like there's something that happens in there, and all it is this encroaching reach that they've had over time. And at a certain point, you realize this is not actually we're on a different page now. We're in a different book even. This isn't what I had originally signed up for.
Yeah, exactly. There's a narrative at that wholesale institutional level and the public domain. They've kind of pretty much got the solution for us already. They just don't want to like openly talk about it. There's loads of very buzzwords kicking around about programmability of the coin and stuff like that. And I've no doubts that probably there will be big elements of that, and that there are pros. There are also potential cons, not necessarily just in privacy and data, but also other algorithms of, people talk about the element of potential control where the eat to earn mechanism, the walk to earn, all of this stuff. Are you going to get paid at the end of the week because you haven't ticked all these boxes or not? That's the big kind of question mark, and I'm probably the biggest concern out of all of it. There's a great point you just mentioned, earlier about not necessarily just homeless people, but there's 2 billion, there's more than 2 billion people worldwide unbankable, and it's kind of like a spin narrative that, oh, we're going to help these people by bringing them into a system. We can allow them to do it because of digital identity, this, that, and the other. And that's not my place to say whether that's right or wrong, because a lot of people might welcome that significantly in that kind of position, and rightly so. That's what freedom should be about. But it's more about the question of, can we, balance that, but actually, are you going to bring in a load of people just because you want them on the system? And then there's that big element of control, exactly what you just mentioned. So there's literally like this topsy-turvy narrative of like what's really going on, but we'll probably never know. It's always been that way, isn't it? The hierarchy of parliament decisions and stuff, and then we're just kind of left with the scraps of we've just got to deal with it. But those that not necessarily in the know, but certainly in the space of Web3, blockchain, etc. Certainly the research, I'm sure you've done a load of it, obviously, as well. You start to pick up on these things, and it's kind of like a bit of a duty to be like, okay, it may or may not happen, but we should definitely talk about it as a possibility, and then start concluding some decisions personally, but also for people to think about. And that's where I think there's a lack of opportunity or lack of thought process behind that, because you'd literally just dump this on the people. And I'm talking about the mass people of the world, the general population, where it's like, oh, we did exactly as I said a minute ago. Or we gave you the opportunity. We didn't advertise about it. You don't know about it. You didn't get hear about it at school or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did give you like the whole of the 3 months to sort it out. Here's a wonderful video report on it.
It was. Didn't you see it? It was on page 324, 500-page document.
Right down there. Can you not read that? Yeah, you had the chance to say something.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar to the whole ledger thing that happened.
Yes,
they converted over to that new way of doing things. It was opt-in, but the problem that people had with that was that there was now this option that ledger could take. There was a way for them to get in, and I think like that was where the uproar happened. But in normal currency, this new programmable money, it comes out as, oh, it's programmable. You can actually pay your taxes automatically. It's amazing. You can, do all these things. But also, if we don't want you to spend your money, we can stop it. But look at all the positives. And I think it's the conversation, as you said, is not happening enough about that little bit at the back.
Yeah, I just don't think there's a public domain for it at all, and there probably won't be, because whether they know it already and they know what's coming and they know we're not going to be happy about it, that's why they're not saying it. Strategically talking about it in the points we just made. I don't know what other countries have been doing. I know that Bank of England one has been around for a few months for people to do the consensus like survey, but other countries I have no idea. I always ask on the channel, like, if you are from a country and you see something similar, let us know, because it's really interesting to see what are the similar questions, are they same concerns that people have. But yeah, it's just I'm not surprised at all. I've seen it way before. I talked about the agricultural bill back in 2020. That was a very similar situation for the farming industry around the world, especially in the UK. Pretty much 24-hour notice to go, oh, if you object, you let us know now. Well, not being funny, but all the farmers, they're up 5 a.m, maybe earlier, work all day doing their crops. Do you think they got time to go and find out that there's a consensus model that you haven't even told anyone about? It's not a surprise to me at all. That's why I kind of partially get agitated about it, because I do try and stand up for people in general as much as possible. I think that's this is a massive thing to let slip through, or not have how much media attention do many other things or group activities get in media and TV and stuff. But this, talking about financial supposed freedom or financial levels for everyone around the world, and I would safely say probably 95%, maybe even more, having a clue what a CBDC is or what any of this is about. should that even have been in part of the general public's voting system? Do we actually want this or not? Of course it won't. It will just come, as I said, a solution deliverable. Oh, we can end inflation. We can have AI algorithm data put into all of this. We'll never have any issues before, and everyone will literally applaud it to the heavens and welcome it. And that's where it's like, do you even know what you're approving here or wanting to start using? It's bizarre.
Yeah, there's an element of powerlessness that I
Mm.
also feel, because it's kind of like, obviously it's a massive thing that's going to happen, and we can't defeat those who are kind of making it happen.
Yeah.
But in the same breath, there is always a percentage of people that don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, for society to function the way it has always functioned,
Yeah.
they can't know, and they won't know. So it's an interesting paradox to play with, because you want people to be enlightened, but naturally there's like a natural balance
Yeah,
to
of course.
that can't happen. I do want to ask though, have you been paying attention to the Fed now stuff?
Yeah, I mean that's kicking off as well, isn't it? In terms of like some actual developments there. I think it's had a bit of back and forth in regards to who's behind it, who's operating it, who's powering it. Yeah, it's again, it's the timing that's really interesting to me. The quietness. Yeah, people concentrate on the actual market and like the price of things. They don't actually look at what's really going on in the background, development wise or updates wise. And the Fed now kind of put something in, a while back, about what they were trying to achieve with it. And now we're at we've already done the end of June. I think they said they were having some proper responses out by the end of July or something like this. So
20th
again,
of July.
timing fantastic of everything that we've been talking about and everything that's to come. It's amazing, really.
Yeah, so the FedNow thing, we heard from an interview. It wasn't an
Mm.
official FedNow statement. FedNow, I think officially we're saying late July, like you said.
Yes.
Somebody
Yeah.
came out accidentally, I think, and said, someone from Finastra?
Mhm.
Someone from Finastra said the
That's
20th,
right. Yeah.
20th of July is the go date, or the big day. So that was quite interesting. But the main thing that I would like your thoughts on really is, I made some discoveries in my digging with FedNow. And FedNow, for all intents and purposes, although not limited to, is a domestic offering. And previously, the clearinghouse
Mhm.
has had instant payments.
Yes.
Since 2017. Obviously, we can all see from the market that that's not been using XRP, for example,
Mhm.
to make that connection. Because if it was, the transfers of money would have been the same over time, and the price wouldn't have come down to the same
Yeah.
degree. So you can't, the last bull run can't be accounted for by that.
Mhm.
All we're doing essentially is moving from one single ledger to a distributed ledger system.
Mhm.
And that's the benefit of FedNow, right? Because now it's not just changing ones and zeros on one ledger, like let's say Citibank or
Yeah.
JP Morgan's ledger. You're now allowing lots of unbanked
Mhm.
people to be able to come into that if they sign up with the Federal Reserve,
Yeah.
or credit unions, all that kind of stuff. But for all intents and purposes, it's domestic. Although they can do cross-border. In my little digging, it's become very apparent to me that we're really more likely to see significant movement in the digital assets that we're in, let's say XRP, for example,
Mhm.
when cross-border is tackled.
For sure.
Because that's the largest area with the most friction.
Mhm.
It's so expensive to send cross-border. And I would be interested to kind of, when we look at the digital pound and the digital euro, for example, what if one ledger was made for Europe, one ledger is made for Britain, or the
Yep.
digital pound, and one ledger for the States? Let's but they would use FedNow, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course.
You can essentially do instant payments on single ledgers without blockchain.
Yeah.
It's possible. because I'm trying to think of a way around using crypto. If I was a government and I didn't want to use blockchain, that's how you would do it. You would create a single ledger, and it would just be transferring would be instant without blockchain. But it's when you get to cross-border, you actually have to have a cryptocurrency and neutral bridge asset. And that's just been something I've been pondering recently. And especially when you look at Fed now being mainly domestic, launching on the 20th of July, what really is going to happen on that date? What do you think?
Well, this is similar to some of the other projects that have been in the past, and you rightly mentioned, the infrastructures, the planning that's been going on in the background. We have no doubt. I followed Project Helvetia, Rosalind, Jura, all of the big ones through the BIS platforms, and that they were heavily involved in what you just mentioned about cross-border payments in relation to the effectiveness of them, the speed of which. And anything technical in terms of communicating to each other. I'm not talking about people picking up the phone here. We're talking about the infrastructure through APIs, whatever it might be, the frameworks. Each country has its own methods, its own processes, its speeds, etc. And it's exactly that same principle with America as well. And I think it kind of loops nicely back actually to your first points, talking about, what's actually going on with the SEC, this, that, and the other. What's actually going on with the elaboration of the dollar itself. We know it's diminishing, it's reducing in power. We know, like, for example, the Chinese have done some unbelievable trade agreements with certain countries and regions in the last 6 months without the use of the dollar for the first time in history, which is probably shaking people's boots in some areas, because they're like, oh, our dollar that we've been using for 100 odd years through the Rothschilds, etc., when they all sort of started this up early 1900s or whatever, has started to be very wobbly. So it's very important that each infrastructure in their own countries and their own countries' rights develops something quite fast, because this planning, as I said earlier, it's not new. It's been going on for some time, but there's a lot of countries that have perhaps been umming and ahhing about it, or maybe don't have the capacity, the resource, or the technical abilities to put something like this in place. They need to really hurry up and be quick about it. But I think there's a crazy statistic, something like over 80, maybe even 90 countries now worldwide already have a piloted system. To your point on the 20th of July, kind of like looping this round, is that this has been planned for a long time. And in generally most cases, you tend to have like test nets and things, of course, and there's an ability to essentially replicate the way, let's use XRP as an example. You have like a wrapped XRP, or at least a testing ground of that. They would probably have done some internal transactions, both bank to bank. I guess we use the word interoperability, right? In terms of the whole structure of the world. How does one bank speak to another across the world or internally? And I've no doubt in my mind they've been testing that rigorously for a long time. It's the same here in the UK. I'm amazed it's being done this quickly, but December just gone, we had the announcement that the Bank of England was looking for a company or companies to create the digital wallet and do various testing grounds. I have no idea what that looks like. No one does, unless you're in there and you're part of the contract system to do that. So that's quite a short space of time, 6 months for something so big. And I'm sure
wonder why. Like, why does it seem to be a rush at the end?
This is where I think it's a bit of a race, because I think it was about a couple of years ago now. I did a video, almost a crazy prediction that Sunak would be the next prime minister and Charles would be in effect to pass through the bills, etc. Not expecting him to be king at that point. That obviously happened over a short period of time as well. But the point being is that they all, through that World Economic Forum build, were integrated in our country to do that. As with anywhere around the world, Biden's the same, part of the World Economic Forum, part of the system, that he's very pro-crypto, as are the rest of the countries. But that doesn't mean that every country is still on par with itself in terms of its speed, efficiency, and putting this stuff together. So I think what's been going on really in the ultimate background is that countries are losing dominance or power in what I would call like the real world currencies at the moment, and panicking. So they're sort of sitting there going, well, if we want to be the number one financial country in the world, we need to buck up our ideas. London's always been financial infrastructure for hundreds of years, especially when the Bank of England actually formed. Obviously in bank as well in London. And I think when that innovation hub was created a couple of years ago, they would have been thinking about this for years. Like, it's not something they just go, oh, one day I'm going to create an innovation hub. I'm going to do loads of blockchain stuff. It's been there forever. Sunak's massively into it. Matt Hancock's massively into it as well. All of these people. And I think what happens is that just ruthlessness of being quiet about it. To us, it looks like it's quick, but actually it probably isn't. In the grand scheme of things, it's been talked about, it's been planned for a long, long time. It's just in our minds, we go, what, December, and you want it done in June? That's mental for a whole entire digital wallet that the whole country has to use eventually in the next year or two. That's where I get a bit of a crossover. And that's why you relate to that CBDC conversation earlier. It's like, what is actually being spoken about behind the closed curtains, or what's being developed in the background? And it's only till the last few minutes in the grand scheme of things, of history of time, that we actually get to see some conclusive play out there. So I have no doubt that America has done exactly the same thing with the Fed now. We don't know which wallet's been chosen for the UK. We don't know. I mean, there's instances where we know kind of like some of the powering of the Fed now system. There's talk about like Metal, etc., have Proton and whatnot. I can't remember who it was before, maybe Consensus or something. So we don't know categorically, but people are always looking for that, like that little connection of like, okay, that system's coming. Who's powering it? I want to know now. And I guess from an institutional level, that money's probably already in the bank. We'll just maybe see the scale out of it after the 20th of July. That's not to speculate that we might see some crazy mini bull cycle or a bull cycle in general, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on. But for more importantly, more people to understand that the variations of cryptocurrencies we can invest in and projects and technologies. For me personally, I'm more heavily interested in the proper real world utility ones. And that's where I think we're going to see massive excitement, not just this year, but in the years to come as development continues. Huge projects. You mentioned Ripple, you got Quant, you got Stellar. They're all going to have their part to play in this. And it's going to be really interesting to see when that 20th of July comes, what kind of reaction do we get? Because we could probably create that trend set for other launches across the world as well, when we find out who's powering them and what's going on. So it's almost an unknown, but exciting at the same time, isn't it?
Of course. I think it's also really important to just maintain. I think you have a pretty level view on it. But lots of people get carried away with.
I try to.
With specific dates and getting, I got carried away personally with the ISO 022 thing in November the 21st last year. Because I had dug so deep into that thing, almost feeling like I got so far in it that I knew it. And it was a nice little realization there that I don't know everything. And there's details that they keep from you that stop you knowing like the full ins and outs.
ISO is really interesting. This, if you actually look back fully in the history of ISO, particularly 222, it's had a few renditions over the years. It dates back. 2013 was one of the last revamps of it, even to the late 90s. This is how far back it goes in terms of conversations. It's just that technology hadn't caught up yet to be able to introduce that or even have that conversation yet. Didn't have the right resource, the infrastructure, etc. Look what's happened in the last 20 years, like in terms of technology advancement, smartphones, apps. We're now going into AR, VR, retina display, all this crazy stuff. So it's kind of understandable. And with something so huge, we can't just switch this on in a year. So it's really interesting to see the history of ISO 222. I was quite cottoned on to what it was about. It was more about the standardization, the actual messaging service behind banking, not so much a kind of like a regulation of crypto, which is where I think some people got a bit confused, but totally understandable because people can easily match up these things. But what's really interesting, and to your overall point, Lewis, is the things going on in the background. If you go onto any of your traditional bank websites and you type in ISO 222 as a search criteria, they've all got their own information on it and how that operates within their banking system. What does it mean to you? Predominantly at the moment, it's more affecting business, small and medium enterprises and things like this, which is why the general public doesn't really know much about it unless you're watching YouTube channels, etc. But the point being is that this has been in a pipeline for a long, long, long time. But the defining point is that it really creates that structure of standardization for blockchain utilization, API, interoperability, all these great things that we're really excited about as investors, as holders, as interested people in the space. This is where it starts to get really interesting, because now that's all in place. The next big stage by November 2025, as of the most recent timeframes, is the RTGS system, the remittance system being replaced and improved upon, utilizing digital currency, crypto, all of these things, including the existing framework, and upgrading it. So this is where it becomes relatively complex, but also when you do know the timeframes and what pieces are what, it starts to make sense. And the pattern's there. People say, oh, CBDCs might not come. Nonsense, they're coming. Like there's categorically coming. I've seen enough in these events and stuff to be like, you don't hire heads of technology at Ripple, Bank of England, Swift, who constantly come to these events talking about this stuff to not do it. The plans are there, and it's really exciting, Lewis, to see that coming, but also a massive opportunity, which really annoys me that there isn't a proper education system about what actually affects us as people and our real world, society, and the way we live, the way we buy, sell things, use our money. We never get taught that unless you go through proper accounting avenues and you start to pick up on blockchain APIs, creating smart contracts, all this stuff. It infuriates me there's not that process there yet. And it's almost like they don't want people to know, because they can then just do all of this stuff that's coming, which is why I feel like, you're fantastic. I love your channel, as you know. And I think it's really important that this community keeps building, of educating people, building that knowledge, so people understand what ISO means to them. How does cryptocurrency affect them? How does a CBDC affect them? And it's just a stumbling block at the moment for people, because they don't have a clue whether it's, what even is it?
Yeah.
It's agitating.
Yeah. The confluence for me in the news being the speeding up of the digital pound, the sudden talks about the digital dollar in documentation, the launch of FedNow, the launch of Quant Overledger platform. Like, it just, why is it all happening now? Like right now. Because and they all fit very well in a narrative, like the Quant Overledger, which I would love to hear more about from you. It's essentially working to bring all of the blockchains together to work properly.
Yeah.
Be interoperable.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at CBDCs coming and seemingly in a hurried manner, and then we're looking at FedNow being launched, and then cross-border payments as a follow-up from that, where you need that interoperability with different ledgers in a distributed way. It's just all happening right now. And I want to know, like, as it relates to Quant specifically, how big of a role is Quant playing in the way the world's money will function?
Yeah, huge. It's huge. I mean, like, even from an advisory perspective, albeit I think more recently they've removed themselves from membership of certain foundations and things, they're still operating with them. They're still, the reason they kind of mainly did that was to purely focus on the speed at which this is coming. As I said earlier, like, this Overledger thing, part of it, I know they've been doing updates over time, but it's not something that's out of the blue. It's something that's been planned for a long time. It's been worked on continuously. I'm fortunate to know a couple of people working there who have met at many of these events, and it's another level, Lewis, like, that these guys are talking, and sometimes I'm sat there scratching my head like, can you just like dumb that down a bit? I have no idea what you're talking about. Too technical for me. But exactly that principle, that they are ultimately the leaders, if you like, at the moment, certainly from a general perspective as well, the leaders in terms of that interoperability aspect. And that's hugely important. And they're not just the only ones. I know there's a lot of other projects we talk about, like Avalanche and Polkadot in some of areas, specifically rated to specific areas of blockchain and smart contract development, etc. But Quant has so much integration with the existing banking system around the world. It's phenomenal. And we're talking about significant amounts of money. Even as mentioned earlier about the RTGS system, that's 720 billion pounds worth a day of money going through that one system. However, your great point earlier is that each country, each bank around the world is going to have its own framework, its own system, its own API system, whatever it might be. And that point earlier that we also made about API needing to talk to each other, communication, Oracle, cloud. I mean, Oracle is a huge partner with Quant, of course. And that plays its giant part as well, because as we move more and more processing data, more information into cloud for that verification processing, the validation of it, the transparency, the more it becomes conclusive that you need something to bridge that. And one of the big buzzwords of Quant is interoperability and bridging. And that's exactly what they've been working on for many, many years. Again, the perception is like they're just switching on really quickly, but actually it's been going on a long, long time. There's been some fascinating remarks and conversations from their team at some of these events that I've been at, to be like, wow, okay, yeah, they're kind of like, there's always a big pool and mix of people of like projects of, are they going to be doing this, something with that? You just know Quant is up here because you've got, like, as I said earlier, head of Swift, head of Bank of England here. You've got the Quant, technical teams there as well. And it's just like, wow, okay, I've yet to meet Gilbert, unfortunately. I'd love to one day just pick his brains about a few things, but the stance is clear as day. And particularly here in the UK for the digital pound, they are massively operable, in that area. What they're doing in other countries, I don't know the inclusive information about that kind of stuff, but for sure here, as the UK, the United Kingdom, wants to become that intuitive power of finance again, the number one destination for that kind of application of blockchain, the information, the expertise, the knowledge, the drive, is fundamental. It's a fundamental part of the whole entire ecosystem. And just to raise a very quick point, not just CBDCs, the tokenization of any physical or digital asset is something that people maybe don't necessarily talk about enough or maybe understand. This is amazing. This is the ability, like cars, houses, even diamonds now. There's a big conversation about diamonds, the ability to fractionalize assets. You don't always have to buy a whole one of it. You can buy part of it with other people, and utilizing things like smart contracts, DIDs, KYC to implement that infrastructure of security, privacy, data accumulation, AI algorithm. It's all part of the humongous system that's coming in the coming years. I always talk about it, even to the state of drones harvesting and seeding based on environmental factors, which are incorporated with AI, data of us, supply and demand, logistics, everything. So when you conclude that, along with trade finance, along with finance in general, transactions, transactions always talked about as you and I passing money back and forth, but a action or a transfer of an action, hence where the word comes from, is anything and everything that we could possibly do will be utilized for this. This is why blockchain is very important, because of that transaction per second perspective. But that's all very well that we've got all these different chains that can boast all this stuff, but it's not very good if that chain can't talk to that one, but that bank uses this one, this bank uses that one. That's why Quant is such a big, massive piece of this to make it all work. And as I said, it's not the only one, but it's certainly the one, if you're looking at financial institutional level where all the money is, it is absolutely incredible. I'm looking forward to seeing the development of Quant more and more as the months and the years go by.
Yeah. Do you think it's a reasonable assumption to say that due to the uniqueness and specific niche that XRP, for example, works in, specifically what they do, that the use of Quant, bridging blockchains, would have a positive impact on the price of XRP because of the sheer amount of value that needs to be transferred from blockchain to blockchain?
Yeah, I think it goes hand in hand. I mean, it's still pretty much speculative, to be honest, in my mindset. Like, we could many people would agree that they would definitely have some form of holding hands in that aspect of growing together. XRP has a great opportunity. Again, that fractionalization topic is very important, because people sometimes go, oh, is it going to cost one XRP to do this? Well, no, not necessarily. It can be broken down, like Satoshis of Bitcoin as an example on their chain. So in terms of like the way that can kind of connect nicely is that each bank, each country is going to be using its own system, its own infrastructure. There is an argument to say that XRP is already in amongst pretty much all the major banks around the world, let's be honest, and particularly in America. I think they pretty much got everyone under wraps on that side of things. I still don't think it's fully conclusive exactly how XRP as a token and the utilization of that between banks will be actually properly used. There's talk of it, of course, but I never see anything like properly official about it. And there's probably reasons behind that, because if they just come out and say, oh yeah, we're doing this, then everyone's going to just go jump in mental, right? And they probably need to utilize Ripple probably need to utilize it themselves in some capacities also on top of that. So yeah, there's elements of that. But to your point about if Quant's doing what it's doing and Ripple's doing what they're doing, of course, I believe they're both going to grow significantly. There's no doubt about it. Ripple's been around for a long time. Their team is unbelievable. We've got them implemented everywhere around the world right now, as our Quant, as I said earlier, just a minute ago. There's no doubt in anyone's mind, I don't think, that this is the way it's going to go. And it's not just those two, of course. There's a multitude of big layered projects, big chains out there. People also talk about, Stellar, for example, Avalanche in its own way, Algorand, from a sustainability perspective. These are huge chains with huge opportunity. But again, it's all great on paper, but now you need to action this. And XRP and Ripple as a whole have, it's a bit difficult to quantify it right now because it's not all fully switched on, but they are there. They're ready to go. And this is my personal opinion about the whole SEC thing. I totally think that it's all theatre. I think they're trying to protect the asset of the digital dollar. And I think that they're trying to create that infrastructure in place so that they can define that the digital dollar remains as the number one around the world, or as powerful as it possibly can be. Whether the interoperable aspect allows that to happen is another question. But I feel like Ripple is one of those, everyone knows it's a top project, but maybe people don't realize or haven't looked deeply enough to realize how much they are into it already. Again, they're great advocates at the foundation events that I've been at, with their heads of teams, head of technology, all of them there. Once you see them on a panel, once you see them in the same room together, you don't need to think much more other than that. Do you think their conversations finish in this room with us? No, of course they don't. They've been talking about 24/7 together, because this is they call it the fourth industrial revolution. These are going to be the pioneers, i.e. essentially the imitation of where we had the .com bubble, where you had a multitude of companies coming in, and there's going to be a handful of them left in the next 20 years' time. I'm pretty much almost guaranteeing in my head that Ripple will definitely be one, Quant will be one, and there'll be a selective few other ones as well as, of course, layer ones, layer twos, no doubt about it, because they all have their own part to play. But Ripple and Quant are significantly involved. Like there's no question about it. We don't even have to talk about that in the sense everyone kind of knows that. But from what I've seen and what I've heard and know, these guys are like fully imprinted in this whole entire world system. And it's very exciting as a holder. But as I said, from a technical mind, in my head, the enthusiasm, the passion of the space, it's like, wow, we're actually seeing this happen like in our lifetime, and an opportunity for sure.
Yeah, it's a rare opportunity to be alive, and also alive and young. Like we can take the full benefit of this when it happens. Hopefully these assets go up in value and we can kind of have the rest of our lives, reaping the rewards of the effort that we made now. But certainly when it just takes, I've always said this, when you're researching as someone who doesn't really know much about crypto or let's say anything, it goes for any topic, you only need to peel back one layer.
Yeah.
And the realization in that peel is ridiculous. Like, for example, the digital pound, I see that on the news. There's a digital pound foundation. Okay, I'm going to have a look.
Yeah.
Like just that step, I'm going to have a look. You will see Ripple, Quant, like they're listed there. And so the only thing required from that moment on is, why are they there? That's the only question that's required, because that opens up all the doors.
Yeah.
And again, it was like I didn't go to this one. It was a live webinar, Digital Pound Foundation. I'm sure
that's right.
You also went to it. James Wallace was there. And the whole time I was thinking, even though I knew, I was thinking, why is James Wallace there? Why is he on the panel talking about a digital pound?
Mhm.
Just have that question in your mind for anyone, watching.
Exactly.
Think why is that happening? And that'll unlock so much
Yeah.
knowledge for everyone.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, again, from that general public domain, Lewis, like the last one I went to physically, MasterCard, Visa, all sat on this panel. Come on, let's think about this. Like, what's going to happen in the coming years?
and in
That,
addition, it, it,
yeah.
it's also, we're not in a situation where it's quant versus Ripple.
Hmm.
They wouldn't be sat in the same room on the same
Yeah.
task force if they were
Yeah.
eating each other's profit.
Yeah.
They're both complementary.
Yeah. I mean, make no mistake in the sense that some chains are in competition because they're after certain areas of industry and sectors. Understandably, that's pretty natural in the world. But the fundamental thing, which I always found very different, especially when I was working in the Web3 space predominantly, is that there's a cohesive pattern of collaboration and working to one unified goal. And I think that is an orientation from some of the development programs, from the sustainability agendas for 2030, certainly in the finance sector, the green usability of things as well. It does all interlace. It is all part of the same conversation, but absolutely hit on the head then, Lewis, in the sense that when you're going to these events or in general across social media or any of the YouTube interviews, whatever you see, there is collaboration. You see it in channels, you see it in influencers, you see it also all the way up to the top level of all these institutions, these companies, these projects are working together and having conversations in the background. I had many with a multitude of chains and technologies last year in particular, of how can we improve this entire ecosystem? First of all, how can we improve our game? How can we improve the ecosystem, of course? But then on top of that is like, actually is a unified defined goal to see how we can all work together. And it's one of the first instances, certainly in my lifetime, I'm not massively old or anything, but in my lifetime, it's the first time I've seen like a sector or an industry actually coming together to identify a goal. Whether that actual end goal is right for humanity or not, or this, that, and the other pros and cons is another question. But the fundamental fact is that exactly what you said, these companies aren't hiding. Well, I'm sure they hide a couple of bits of information from each other, but there was no hiding of the conclusive goal. And it was really, really apparent to me. And obviously yourself, because you picked up on it as well. I'm sure many others have too. And it's a really interesting, exciting time to be involved with all this.
Absolutely. I'm quite interested to know, as like a final question, because you're so deep in the weeds about everything that's going on in the UK. I think actually there's a lot of interest from outside the UK,
Mhm.
all towards the UK, because of how quickly we're moving and how
Yeah.
it starts in London, that whole thing. What is the most exciting part of the next kind of 2 months for you in the UK specifically?
Certainly, I'd like to see some answers from that consensus survey. I think I don't know how many people filled out. I'd be surprised if there's a lot of people because they didn't know about it. But I think that's a very important stepping stone, whether they release all of the information or at least parts of it to the general public. I think that's very important from the development perspective and people's like mindset behind it. But I'm also particularly very interested from the UK side as to, and possibly more from the investing side, as to which project or company has been selected to continue the development of the digital pound wallet. Because this, as I said, ended it within the last 30 days anyway. We probably won't hear about it for another month or two as they continue that development, because I think they got an extra month after being selected or being the winner, if you like, whatever they call it, to have an extra month to finish the piloting and the framework behind it. And I think in my head, I'd love it to be a blockchain or a crypto project, if you like, that we hold, because then I think people will start really realizing like, oh, this is actually seriously happening now, and these are the kind of companies that are behind it. So I'm really interested in that side of things. But then also, touching on the very beginning part of this regulation aspect of it, this is huge because you mentioned rightly so earlier, it defines United Kingdom as a top area of finance again in terms of their production of this. Now, I don't watch the news or anything like that. I know there's certain narratives about other countries and stuff, but China's been doing this a long time, right? We have to be honest and open about this. They're well ahead. But to the defining public who orientate mind around media or watch TV and stuff like that, they may be oblivious to that and actually just say, "Oh wow, this is just the UK. This is amazing." But either, irrespective of that, and what China's doing and Russia have been doing with the digital ruble, etc., this defines almost like the principle of not necessarily domination, but certainly something that shows an expertise level is rising here in this country, and defining itself as maybe a hub. I know Paris is trying to do a similar thing, and some other countries as well. You could argue Brussels in terms of the fact that they're the head office of the EU, etc., but they haven't really concluded anything around crypto other than the European Commission blockchain infrastructure and stuff. But for us as a government, and essentially a law to regulate and the utilization being allowed of digital currencies, stable coins, cryptocurrency in general is massive. People were asking or trying to see for reaction, but actually you've got to try and get that concluded around the world. Then you've got to produce the narratives, the advertising behind this. The mass adoption will then come in. And that's where I see, I know you said the 2 months, but my vision in the sort of next 6, 12, 18 months, when I do believe that's when the next huge cycle will come. And I do believe it will be defined with the integration of AI and CBDCs, especially as we conclude towards 2025 with it all switched on. Probably that situation of buy the rumor, sell the news will kick in the sense that people are like, November 25, it kicks on, we're going to be rich, but actually it will probably happen before that as we learn more. That's where I think it's really exciting, because your great point earlier, the timing is sensational. Not just here in the UK about regulation. What's the Fed now doing? 2 huge financial institutions, by the way, over in China, Hong Kong, etc., doing massive work on CBDCs and the infrastructure of blockchain as well. And these are all huge clogs of the system. This is why I'm excited over these coming months. More excited at the moment because there's a huge opportunity. We're in a winter market, obviously. There's an opportunity to start learning. If you don't know anything, start learning. And as you said earlier, like foundational bits of information, small bits of information first, and build on that. And start learning about what you're actually invested in and which ones are actually going to be really included in this. Because there's an opportunity now with these prices as they are. When mass adoption kicks in, some would argue it's too late. But then when we're talking about actual utility and usage from 2025 onwards, then it's pretty much bye-bye, unless you've got big, serious chunks of money, in my honest opinion. And you can only look at the reflective trend of the past, as you said, the Web3, the worldwide bubble in 2000 or late 90s. You could multiply that potentially 10, 50 times, because we've got a lot more people in there today. We've got a lot more digital access, more unbankable people coming into the situation, the ability of tokenization, of play to earn, learn to earn, all these things, an opportunity for people to earn extra tokens and money into the system. This is where it can get really, really exciting. So that's what I'm kind of looking forward to the most.
Yeah,
but seeing these stepping stones,
Yeah, I think what's been quite exciting to me is seeing, specifically with these UK bills and different documents from the Law Commission and stuff, there are levels to the definitions of crypto. So first of all, you have what are digital assets, and then that's very broad. And then the Law Commission is talking about smart contracts now and defining smart contracts. Like they've actually completed that whole thing now already. Yeah. But then they've got definitions of, how can people earn yield or stake? And like, it's really, really in there trying to define these things, because ultimately that will inform the law at such a level that is required for the law. And so you look at like the US, and maybe they're doing this all in the background, but at least publicly, there's no definitions. It's all gray. Like no one knows what's going on. But there are clear stepping stones towards clarity of what it is. And if you're in the situation now where you're reading these things as they're developing and you're speculating here and there in the assets that you're drawing conclusions to at this stage, it's like the most prime opportunity that you could get, aside from being in Bitcoin in 2008,
it's learning curve, Lewis. Like, I'm not sitting there saying I'm a giant expert. I've been in blockchain for a few years now. I've worked in the space as well, gained a lot of great knowledge and great people in this space. But ultimately, like, everyone started somewhere, and it's kind of funny because, you know, people have been doing it since 2008, have been doing it since 2013, jumped in at 2017, and even then I was late to the party in that aspect. It doesn't mean you can't catch up.
No.
People buy and sell at various different cycles and levels, but the point being is that, yeah, great. I think there's a lot of speculation. There was a lot of crazy projects and ideas. Now, this last year has taught a lot of people a lesson that we can't treat, or at this moment couldn't treat the crypto market like we do with any other market or any other industry. People just jumping in because they made loads of money. I'm going to start my own project. Didn't have a strategy, all the right people, blah, blah, blah. And now everyone's taken a step back, developed, maybe reduced their teams a bit. But actually, the most biggest part is the identifiable aspect of exactly what you said. You know, digital assets, tokenization of assets is going to be humongous. Trade finance, and of course, like the whole entire consensus of the existing financial system being moved across to this full digital blockchain powered format is absolutely staggering. And yes, Bitcoin arguably started this back in 2018 on their blockchain. Fantastic technologies. Still one of them, if not the most secure chain in the world. But then that's purely developed in different layers, different opportunities of areas to think and work about. Decentralization versus centralization. There's still a lot of definitions to be concluded. Yes, we've got regulation. Yes, we've got law imprinted here in the UK, pretty much signed and sealed. But that then needs to be defined and educated to people. And that's a huge, big missing step. That's why I'm excited about the next 6 to 18 months, because there's a lot of people in here already. There's a lot of people waiting on the sidelines. There's going to be a lot of news coming out. Then people will be like, oh, I never knew about this. And it's been going on for years. And people will go, I told you so, all that stuff. And then on top of that, you've got all these projects and technologies that are literally been developing the last 2-3 years, learning their lessons. The infrastructures would be phenomenal. And that's why it'd be exciting for us as investors, whichever ones you hold. But, you know, I'm sure I've got a list of defined ones, particularly for the financial industry, certainly ones we've spoken about just a minute ago, where we're going to see some very conclusive moves over these coming years. So in our lifetime, Lewis, it's mad.
Yeah.
Great.
Very, very exciting. Just as a final question, just to go back to the digital wallet for the digital pound, who's in the running and who do you think's going to get it?
That's the big question, because when they open this up, obviously it's very tight knit, and there's no kind of general public knowledge at all. There's just literally the only thing we know as a public information wise. There's still on the Bank of England site, I believe 20 companies, I think it was 20, were shortlisted. So 20 companies went on to build their framework, their pilot, their trial system. From my understanding, the idea was that by the end of June, a winner, if you want to call it that, or whoever's been given the contract, carries on. I don't know whether one's been picked, 2, 3. I was on the assumption it'd be one, and there's a contract that was something like £200,000. And then there's another month extension if they really needed to accumulate some extra infrastructure or fix things. This is, again, point of the excitement of the next few months is I'm anticipating and believe that we would start getting some information as to which company that was, or at least maybe not perhaps in our faces, but certainly slyly to go, oh, this company's all of a sudden started talking about digital wallets and the UK pound and stuff. You could put the 2 and 2 together. But generally speaking, I think they're quite usually open when it does get to the point of opening up to everyone to say, X company has been picked. Now, there is something news-wise that came out, I think, a week or so ago, but I don't think it orientated around the exact company that was doing it, but certainly in an agency, which was really interesting. The agency almost potentially taking over from the Bank of England to orchestrate this infrastructure and positioning. So I would advise everyone to keep an eye on that development, whether the news comes through this agency, through the Bank of England, or we might find it out ourselves randomly. I'd be surprised if we didn't hear about that sooner rather than later, because 2025 is literally around the corner, and I would anticipate that they'd want this wallet, this system in place for when it all starts kicking off.
Yeah.
And again, UK, announcing the regulation, announcing the innovation hub, would probably want to be the ones that have the first proper wallet that's in utilization.
And talking about custodianship.
Yeah.
That's also in there. So that
Yeah.
these things are being defined and worked on. So
Exactly.
it's hand in hand.
Exactly.
Right. I love that conversation. It's nice to have UK-based conversation in this. I don't think we're represented enough. But here we are. I want to urge everyone to go over to Whales of Wall Street YouTube channel.
Oh, too kind. No.
You can go and learn more than you probably learn on my channel anyway. Especially from a more technical standpoint, and I think you articulate things in a way that's accessible for everyone. So thanks for your contribution.
You're too kind, Lewis. I love your channel, as you know. Really massively appreciate being here with you. Let's do some more. Absolutely. I love this conversation. We've got so much in our heads, just limited time. So I look forward to the next one, mate.
And I'm sure I'll see you at an upcoming in-person event, I think, for the digital.
100%. Absolutely. There's plenty of them.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Nice one. Thanks, Lewis.
Thank you for watching. It was a good interview, wasn't it? Yeah, I think so too. So if you want to watch some extra videos of mine, you can watch more podcast episodes right there. There's the bottom one. The top one is a video that the algorithm thinks is perfect for you. You can also click my face right there if you want to subscribe to this channel and see my daily updates every weekday. Come on, stay emotionless. I'll see you in the next one.